Hello, folks. It's Elia Hart, and we're here again to do another discussion on body electronics. It's now the 7th of March, 2023. And so I'm just going to let the two men, we've been doing a series of talks every Tuesday for several weeks. I've lost count. We've probably done at least a dozen. So, people can look back on that and find that on my YouTube page. And I want Guy and Jeff, will you please just take a couple of minutes and introduce yourself and just a brief introduction so that if people are seeing these videos for the first time, they can know where we're coming from. Guy, would you start?
Sure. Hey everybody, my name's Guy Armstrong. I'm living in New Zealand. I first got into body electronics around the late 90s, and I really enjoy it as much as I can. It's beautiful work. So we had a point holding group back then for a couple of years. That was really fruitful and sort of beneficial. And around 2010, I went to my first experience of body electronics with Elia, and I've since been to a couple more, one in 2012 and 2015. And then I had my cranial points held around 2015, and since then I've just been doing a little bit of point holding with a friend of mine here, and it's still good. Definitely a very powerful, enjoyable process. Yeah.
Great. I always say that a point holding group starts with two people. Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hi, my name is Jeff Schofield. I currently live near St. Louis, Missouri, on a small farm that I've been taking care of for about 12 years. My passion that's got me through this pandemic is to raise ducks and geese, and I have something to take care of every day. I first was introduced to body electronics as a chiropractic student at Palmer Chiropractic College, and my interest was because my oldest daughter Jennifer was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, and I'd heard stories about people with cerebral palsy doing body electronics, being able to heal themselves doing that. That got me into the practice of body electronics, first of my daughter, and then I got into practice and took my daughter to Maui, where I studied under John and Doug.
John Ray and Doug
and
Morrison.
Then John Ray and Doug Morrison, right? The John Ray being, of course, the founder of body electronics. And I think I attended two or three more times in Maui, and then twice with Doug when he taught out in Pennsylvania. And one of those times was the VNC, where I was facilitating for Ilya when she accessed the time-space continuum, which was quite a profound experience for both of us. And I'm still working the principles in my own life, and it is, the obedience to principle that brings the blessings of heaven. So back to you, Ilya.
Okay, so one of the things that came to me for for new people watching this is what is body electronics? It's so mysterious. It has so many mysteries to it because it's so multi-layered. And so I wanted just to bring it into something that's very simplistic to introduce it again. What we're doing is it's a holistic self-healing modality. So there's no patient practitioner model. This is something we are inspired to take on ourselves as we choose to change our own consciousness from within. And I think that's really, really important to know. And also, so the main focus, if we can boil it down to one main focus, is that we are looking within our own consciousness, we are looking to remove anything less than love. We're looking to transmute that. And what we call it in body electronics, we use a lot of electrical terminology. So like the 0 ohms resistance, for example, and resistance. The way we define resistance is anything less than pure unconditional love. So we can imagine how much we have held if we're mostly unconscious, which we know that we are. We know that the consciousness of humanity is mostly unconscious. And from that, we start to chip away from the inside out at our own consciousness and releasing, as it arises in our awareness, anything less than pure unconditional love. And we do that. We have a particular way of going about doing that, and it's very sequential. Today we started, today I was inspired just before we opened up the meeting to put on the group page on Facebook, the Body Electronics group page. I took a picture of the flow sheet out of the Body Electronics experience. And just so people can get an understanding of the acupressure points that we hold and what the sequence of those points are. They don't have to be an exact sequence. Sometimes we jump around depending a little bit on the person's physicality. Yet we do keep pretty much to that flow sheet in terms of the STO points are always the first ones held. We restore the nerve supply and circulation with those points. Then we move into the endocrine points, and then from there we move into spinal points. From spinal points we move to pre-cranial points, and then cranial points, and then post-cranial points. So that would be the order, the sequence in which the acupressure that we hold, which we call point holding, that's the sequence in which that is done. So in intensives, we give and receive equally. We hold the points. We're taught to hold the points by a certified instructor. And when we're on the table, we're having our points held and we're doing the internal work. Yeah, so that's kind of just a very, very brief, but it's kind of a bit of an introduction in what body electronics actually is. What are we actually doing? We're looking to change our own consciousness. And within the body electronics experience, there's principles that we practice. We practice physical principles, for instance. We become nutritionally saturated, nutritionally prepared if we're going to go into point holding, and we study. That's part of the physical principles. We study the written material in Doug Morrison's book How We Heal, and John Ray's books, and my book The Body Electronics Experience. And then we discipline the body to hold perfectly still, and we discipline the body to be able to really do the 3-part breath in a very rhythmic way without ceasing. So that's just to touch on some of the nutritional and physical principles. And then we move from those principles once we get to a certain point with those principles, nutrition being extremely important within that process. We have a very definite nutritional protocol, and that protocol revitalizes, it detoxifies and revitalizes simultaneously. So we have trace minerals, enzymes, the essential fatty acids are important, probiotics are important, and raw proteins are important to get that endocrine system back up and running. People are having a lot of issues with our endocrine systems either being overtaxed or not functioning properly at all. So we want to get that endocrine system really up and running, really vital for the actual point holding in the process of that we go through in the regeneration process through the point holding. So I'm really rendering it down into some simplicity here. and people can really go into the complexity of it as they look at the written material and look at the videos that there's well over 100 hours of video on my Body Electronics YouTube page. And yeah, there's lots of things to access that to get more knowledge. So let's put that. I want to say something about knowledge. So we can gain that knowledge by all of the written material, and that's very, very, very important. John Ray used to say that you know, we have to be psychologically prepared, and learning and reading is part of that psychological preparedness, and that's very, very important before we get on the table. We have to know what we're doing before we get there. We have to know why we're there and what we're doing when we get there. You know, how to transmute, what we're looking for. There's so many layers to it. So that's really important. Yet, and it's the reason I put my title of my book, The Body Electronics Experience, because until we actually have the experience, you know, the group experience of point holding, where we're really doing the internal work and we're getting the calcifications, the crystalline structures that become calcified in certain parts of our body. We're wanting to break that down. And that is what's being held in those calcifications are the memory, the word patterns, and the emotion that has been suppressed. So what we're looking for is to invite our own consciousness to release in, you know, and it's always in this perfect amount that we can handle, bring it to our awareness so that we can actually transmute what we're actually holding in an unconscious level within those crystalline structures. So that gives you like a really a very, very, very condensed idea of what the purpose is of body electronics, and a little bit of how we go about doing it. So so I did put a picture today. I took a photo of the flow sheet and I put it on that group page so people can look at that. Just to see the sequence in which we work. I figured it out one time. There's about 28 main points on the flow sheet that really would have to be held prior to even considering pre-cranial points. And so, and the interesting thing, because I haven't held a body electronics intensive since 2015. So it's been a number of years. I've managed body electronics point holding groups that, you know, we did like little groups here and there when I was traveling. And also I have done some virtual teaching for people who I have taught, and they're actually holding the point holding group, which is not an intensive, by the way. I want to make that distinction. An intensive and a point holding group is totally different. An intensive is held by an instructor, managed by an instructor. They have, you know, they have the full responsibility, and it is just that. It is an intensive. It's a very intensive time where people gather to give and receive point holding and go through the healing crises. The point holding groups are groups that have been, you know, like you said, Guy, you actually have a point holding group, you and your pal that regularly, I know you regularly, almost weekly, have a point holding. So that's a very regular point holding group. One of the issues about point holding groups is people, you know, in relation to the flow sheet, people tend to lag. So they'll, unless there's somebody really in charge that really takes on the leadership role, or at least one or two people do that, then nothing happens. There's, you know, the point holding groups just sort of fade away. And I've seen that, you know, over the 20 years that I've been instructing, I've seen that over and over and over and over again. There has to be someone that really takes responsibility, at least one person, preferably two or three that share responsibility. But there has to be at least one person that really takes on the responsibility within an area, within a geological area, to keep that work going and keep it going regularly. Because what happens if, let's say we lag off our point holding group for 6 months, guess what point we have to hold to get started again, what everybody has to have held. SDOs. We have to start from square one. So yeah, so it's the more we really keep it going and keep it going and keep going. It's not that we can't go back voluntarily and have our SDOs points held. I mean, that's always advantageous. As we're moving up the scale of emotions, it's very advantageous to bounce back every once in a while. And you asked about that in your point holding group last week, Guy. And after, I mean, I felt that there was like something that you had to jump on that day, but I think what you suggested there to go back to the SDOs would be very advantageous. So that might be something you would consider in the near
yeah,
future.
I was gonna say, yeah, that the other man in the group, he's he doesn't use drugs or anything like that. I mean, he hasn't had a glass of alcohol since 1982 or that sort of thing. He's been on a really, really good kind of diet. So yeah, even in people that have a very, should we say, a pure lifestyle in terms of what they put in their body, it's still important to go back and do the excuse me, the SDOs once in a while.
Well, there's much more than we're dealing with, exactly, because there's much more than we're dealing with other than the physicality of what we're taking in. I mean, there's more than that. There's like what we're breathing into is part of it, and what we're putting on our skin is part of it. But there's also genetic factors that we have to be aware of. So, circulation and nerve supply can actually be a genetic factor. It can be, and foremost, it can be a factor of resistance. So where our resistance puts pressure on the nerve supply and circulation. So the physical aspects and the nutritional aspects are actually, they support and give the foundation to the healing crises, but they are, there's much more to consider. So yes, absolutely. Yeah, get those SEO points held. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I was going to ask, did you want to say something about the sort of immediate environment in our point holding sessions and what's kind of important as far as where it should be? Like, obviously holding points downtown in a sort of apartment where you've got cars whizzing by is not ideal, that kind of thing.
Well, the first question I ask when I look for a venue, the first question I ask is about noise. And it's not about the noise that's coming in, it's about the noise going out. The noise that we will make as a point holding group. People have to be very free to express and emote emotion. And I remember when I made the shift from fear, which is in the heart thymus, to anger, which is the thyroid parathyroid. When I made that shift, I had these screams that came out of me that were, I didn't even know I could scream that loud. They were like these amazing screams, just kind of like came out. And I don't know if you recall, Guy, at the Salt Spring Islands intensive that you attended, there was a man at that who had the same experience where this spontaneous scream came out of him many times, and it was like a huge part of that healing crisis that he was going through. And I had rented that space that I thought was very well contained in, we were in the middle of the forest, and but people a mile away were concerned. And as anybody knows in body electronics, it's never happened in any of my events, but I've heard many stories about how people call the police. They hear a word pattern being screamed out, like "Don't touch me," or "Leave me alone," or "I hurt," or whatever the word patterns are, but like much louder than that, with maybe some screaming or whatever. So that's the first consideration as far as I'm concerned, so that people can really truly feel comfortable in emoting, in expressing when they need to, when they can really, really express those emotions. So that's the first thing. I like a place where people can go outdoors, and you know, be near water particularly is really, really, really beautiful. You know, when I was on Salt Spring, of course, we were on an island, so it was that was very conducive. Geologically, even I've considered places where I've held my events. So Salt Spring is built. It's actually a built up amount of quartz crystal. It's just a big, you know, all the Gulf Islands there in the Pacific coast are just quartz crystal, and so they amplify. The quartz really amplifies emotion, and people see that when they first come there. They, you know, they've never lived there before. They come there and they, you know, they don't know anything about body electronics, but you know, they've just come there to live, and like after about 6 months, their buttons, like the island actually pops their buttons, and most people actually leave within the first 6 months. So I chose, you know, that's you know, conducive to body electronics work, because it's really you know, that intensity of the quartz is really helping us move that energy and move that move those emotions, and move everything, move the healing crises more into our awareness. And same goes with Sedona. Sedona is a perfect place to do that. It's also very intensified by the iron in the rocks, and the you know, the just the whole geological vortexual energy that you know, the minerals can create, and the yeah, whatever's there, the red rock. I mean, it's just very conducive to the healing crises. Yeah, so that's really one of the biggest reasons. Mount Shasta, wow. Mount Shasta, before we went on air, we talked a little bit about the violet flame. And of course, Mount Shasta, wow, that was a talk about popping buttons. I mean, you can just go on the mountain and you can get your buttons popped, you know, just by being there. So does that answer a little bit about your question?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's sort of more so than
enough.
what I expected. Yeah, thank you. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I like those areas where people can get out and have a swim if they want. You know, just have some fresh air at lunchtime. But then before and after the point holding day is finished, and we do long days. Anybody that's been to a point holding event, we start at 9 a.m. sharp. We try to be finished by 6 o'clock, but often it will go later than that. And we only have an hour in the midday to have our lunch. We do a shared potluck lunch. So people are usually, you know, Doug was very on point. He really kept things really well within the 9 to 6, because of course people need to eat, they need to mineralize, they need to get their nutrition. So so he kept it very on point with that. And I attempt to do so too. I definitely keep it on point at 9. I start my lecture right at 9 o'clock, as Doug made such a great example every day. He in the months and months, and we figured it out. Doug and I figured it out one time. I think it was like 54. I think I did 54 weeks of intensives with Doug, like an entire year over a 5-year period. So in the 5 years I had with Doug, I spent a whole year with him. So that's, yeah. So
wow.
So it just has this, you know, there's been a lot integrated, let's put it that way. A lot of Doug, the way Doug presented the intensives, which were extremely, you know, Doug is an extremely intelligent human being, and I learned so much from him. So I attempt to do many, many, many things like Doug taught. Let's put it that way. I'm what you call a classic body electronics instructor. That's what I call myself. I like to keep things to the principles, and within the realm of reality and certainty, how John and Doug really kept things in that way. So I know you have to leave early today, Guy, so I'd like you to kind of take over here. Do you have something do you have a topic that, or some questions or anything that you want to throw out? You probably
Well,
have
I wrote down a few things on my little pad here. The one that strikes me as kind of important now is that when we, how can I put this? When we're preparing for a point holding intensive, it's not just the intensive or the group that's important. It's like the whole path leading up to it and even after it.
Yes,
Yeah.
very definitely. Yeah.
So it's not
Almost
just,
as important as the intensive itself. That's why I started months ago and putting so much energy into helping all those who are interested in coming to an intensive. You know, I have one scheduled for June, so I've been months and months and months now with really teaching, and it's really part of why we're doing this too, these weekly, you know, so the people that are preparing, they get a little bit more every week, a little bit more information and a little bit more inspiration. So it's really the intent behind doing these videos is to help people prepare. And the longer the better. I mean, I've cut the registration date off at 6 weeks prior, but that's really cutting it tight. I mean, that's somebody, if they just started out 6 weeks and they hadn't even done any reading or any nutritional preparedness prior to that, that would really be really cutting it tight. I do that more for the people so that we can, you know, I can share with the group and you know, just take them that step further. You know, I'm going to do a weekly group Zoom with the people who are registered, and then we will get a lot of things sorted out prior to that. But that's people that have already been preparing. So it's not that you can't prepare in that 6 weeks, but it would take a lot of effort. And of course, afterwards, you know, we gradually prepare the nutritional process, and then we come to saturation level throughout the entire, you know, usually a week or two prior, we get into saturation level prior to an intensive. Throughout the entire intensive, a week or two after the intensive, we stay in saturation, and then we start to gradually decrease our minerals, particularly our minerals, to the point where we say it's down to what is maintenance level, which is about, I think about 1.5 ounces is maintenance level a day, 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces a day. It's just you know, maintenance level to keep your trace minerals you know, for daily activity. But we need so much more trace minerals and so much more, you know, our endocrine system has to be, and our heart is part of our endocrine system, by the way. In most sort of medical models, we don't see them speaking about heart as part of the endocrine system, but in body electronics, we teach that it is. And Doug always said that it actually produces hormone as well. So the heart is part of the endocrine system. So we want the entire endocrine system really in a vital, you know, in a revitalized state. So I can't say enough how important it is to prepare and get all those nutritional preparations, those psychological preparations. I mean, Doug's book isn't an easy read, particularly. It's this thick, and it has a lot of depth in about, you know, in a paragraph. It can have so much depth that it takes a lot of contemplation to really even absorb small amounts of that book. So I say, just, you know, dig into it, but yet but be aware that it is, you know, it is written with a lot of depth. Now my book, on the other hand, was written sort of condense very deep and complex principles. So I condensed them. So I made them. I made my book. You know, it's very, very small. It's under 100 pages, and it can be read in an evening if somebody it can be read from beginning to end, and then you can go back and kind of, go deeper into it. But, and I include a lot of pages from Doug's book and from John's book so that they can like jump right in to sort of the meat and potatoes of the point holding experience. Yeah. Just kind of brings it into a little, more into a condensed, simplified version. Yeah.
All right. I better say goodbye now. Thank you, bud.
Okay. Thank you, Guy. And we'll see you
Bye,
next
Guy.
see you next Tuesday.
All right. See you next
Thanks
time.
so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Toodles. Toodaloo. Okay, it's up to you and I, Jeff. You want to take it over for a while and see where we go with that?
Okay.
Drink a little rest.
Yeah, have some lemon water there. I was actually thinking, as you were speaking, about a very simple thing people can do while they're preparing is to buy some pH strips and monitor their urine and saliva pH as they're preparing, just as a simple way to check whether or not you're staying alkaline. Yeah, as an indicator of the lack of inflammation in the body as you're preparing.
Yeah, and one of the things I'll add in there,
thing.
I'll just jump in just quickly. Don't be alarmed when people start getting on the enzymes and the minerals and the full nutritional program, but particularly enzymes and minerals. It's a great detoxifier and a great alkalizer. So what the body is going to do is rid itself of toxins and acidities. So for a period of time, especially the first, the onset for the first period of time, people could be quite shocked about how acid their urine could turn out to be. So not to be alarmed by that, just, that's part of the process. It's part of the detoxification process. But eventually you keep going with the nutrition and eventually your urine will come up into a good alkalization. I've just written about it recently about the alkalinity versus acidity as far as, like stomach acid, for instance. One of the things that the stomach has to be is very, very acid. It's at like 1.5 or something like that, right? And we have to have an extremely acidic stomach in order to have good digestion. So one of the things that I've heard a lot of people over the last year, particularly, recommending to take copious amounts of baking soda. What copious amounts of baking soda actually does in the stomach is alkalize the stomach acid so that people have reduced ability to digest. The only time I would ever recommend baking soda, aluminum-free baking soda at that, not Arm & Hammer or something like that, that would, add to their issues. But if there was just like so much regurgitation of acid in that it would be burning the esophagus. So that would be the only time that I would ever recommend baking soda to be taken. Until you actually have to get the acid up in the stomach in order to to reduce all of the digestive issues. It seems counterintuitive, but when you study it, you really get the drift of how that works. So just wanted to throw that in there about that acid alkalinity. But yes, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, as far as another thing I just came up with for my own use that it's like a daily habit is I'll take a couple ounces of minerals and a couple of tablespoons of apple cider vinegar and some grapefruit juice to kind of dilute the intensity of both the apple cider vinegar and the minerals, and I'll drink that down. And I've heard, apple cider vinegar by itself, diluted in water, is something that's very good for people who have problems with acid reflux which is one of the things that motivates people to do the baking sodas, because they have this acid reflux.
Right.
So that's something you might, look at as far as uh, your pH, and a way to deal with this. So many medications are given to suppress this acid reflux that people experience, because the foods themselves are not all they should be. But just a very simple thing to do to start your day is just some apple cider vinegar, or apple cider vinegar during a meal, and in a little bit of water, not to dilute your digestive juices too much.
Yeah, apple cider vinegar is great. I had it, I think it was maybe a week or two ago. I had it as the supplement of the day on the Body Electronics group page on Facebook. Yeah, I've never tried it with the minerals though, which is an interesting sort of concept. So I'll look at that, because the apple cider vinegar is acidifying, and then the minerals have an alkalizing effect. So I'm wondering, but have you been doing that for a period of time, and you feel like it's really nicely digested?
Well, I've done several of the liver flushes that Hulda Clark promotes, and the reason I use grapefruit juice as like a diluter of those two things is because I've had such curious experiences with the liver detox. So I don't know, it's just something that I'm just trying new. I can't say that I've had extensive experience with putting those three things together, let alone just the two with the, like you were asking. But you can dilute it with just water if you don't want to do the grapefruit juice, I suppose.
Well, I like a little bit of grapefruit juice with my minerals. But I just use a little bit of water with my apple cider vinegar.
Okay. So you're doing it in, the two separate assaults on the esophagus.
Yeah, I do the
So,
apple cider vinegar first thing in the morning. I really like it first thing in the morning. It really seems to really clears everything out, and I really like the effect that it has. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, well, that's it's all good. First and foremost, always, is to try something and listen to your own body, because we all have such different chemistries that it's not a a magic pill syndrome thing.
Right.
You have to be your own physician.
That's right.
And that's actually my big goal in life, is to re-empower people as their own physician. Having been in that role of being a physician where people came to me as a chiropractor, that's quite a shift. But like you said, Ilya, in the body electronics experience, there's no doctor-patient relationship. It's
right.
If it's a rare breed indeed that you can find someone willing to spend 2 to 3 hours per session holding points on you. I mean, it takes an understanding of the principles to where you can put your body into position to experience a healing crisis. Mm-hmm. And the first time you get yourself to a place and you've done all this reading like I had done before, I actually was with John, Ray, and Doug. It's like and this is one thing that I really liked about his teaching methods, was how it was experiential, like you said, Ilya. And you would you would go there and there would be teaching, and then you'd divide up and everybody would have their point holding experience or being the point holdee. And so there was this group energy that always happens when you have a lot of people in the same room, which amplifies the experiences versus what Guy was talking about, where he has a friend that just comes together. Not to, denounce that, because if you can find one person to help you in today's world, that's really a blessing. Myself, I've been on this path of the lone wolf for so long. It's like I keep drawing to myself different ways of accessing my healing crisis without having someone to hold my points. And I find it a very curious time. And Ilya has put together this June intensive, and she's been working diligently to bring people together. And unless there's at least 10, you say, is a preferred number.
At least,
maybe you want to talk
preferred,
about
well,
that
a preferred number
bit.
is at least 12. Yeah, a preferred number is at least a minimum of 12 registered. That's minimum. That's actually minimum, not preferred, but minimum. And yeah, and the more the merrier, because in the venue that I've rented is can accommodate probably at least 30 very comfortably. Very, very, very comfortably. Yeah.
That's cool. I like I said, I've had that desire to create a healing center based in physical immortality, which would definitely involve the application of body electronics. I remember John did teach a few times. He would say it only takes one person to change, a shift, one person's shift in consciousness can affect all people because we're all connected to the same light. And so I look at you and me, Ellie, as kind of like going for that principle that, by changing my consciousness, I can actually morphogenetically help raise the consciousness of others. And in that, it's so beautiful because that is the core truth of body electronics, is that we've always had the power, but the light to self-regulate, self-heal, to be sovereign beings. And that's our divine birthright, is to reclaim that. And there obviously is the yin and the yang of it all, the duality, and that sovereignty lies in the what I call the thin fine line that divides yin and yang, the S shape. And John used to talk about the yin and the yang a lot, and he teaches about it in his books. So yeah, it's like when you're having your points held and you're on the table, and all of a sudden this light that has always been inside of you starts to open the dualities that you have going on inside of you, as far as this being more important than that. And so if you make one thing more important than another thing, you will automatically draw the side of the duality that you're not paying attention to because it's bad or not important. And you'll draw that to you. And currently, in our society, we have a tremendous amount of poison being given to us as food. And I want, and on the other side is this purest good food. And so it's like two sides, what you part your lips with is, of course, your own choice. But still, the tremendous amount of people who, from an unconscious level, are consuming, and as we the people are the governors. We're the real ones that if we. But I always I find it curious that the magic pill syndrome, all of the different drugs, whether legal or illegal, that people use to suppress their physical pain, and this pain is actually a kind gift from and is a result of the resistance that comes from looking at one thing being more important than another. So when you can let go of the duality, like Ilya beautifully stated earlier, how she gradually just looked on each side of the duality until it just came together like a magnetic draw to your own heart's light. And if for those, and I have recently read a book which was authored by on the board of directors for the Western Prize Foundation, and it's called The Cosmic Heart. And in there, he says the heart is not a pump. He says that's a fallacy that's been taught in the medical community, that actually the pump that pumps the blood in a little tiny embryo is before the heart's even formed, is actually the positive and negative charges which exist within the blood vessel itself. The outer being the positive and the inner being the negative. And it's the repulsion of those two forces inside the capillaries out at the lymphatic junctions that pushes the blood back up the veins to the heart and creates blood pressure. So these issues with blood pressure and the concept of what the heart is an endocrine gland, like you stated, and it's really important, I think, misunderstanding that most of us have, that our heart is the pump. It's really the pump is from the positive negative charges that exist at the capillaries. Would you like to talk about that? Is that something you'd heard about before, Ilya?
Doug always talked about
cosmic
that.
heart?
Yeah, Doug always talked about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Right on. Yeah.
Okay.
I will add something there though, because in relation to attachment, so bringing the duality together within the mental body, and the attachments that we find when we go through our emotional pain, and we can access the access to duality within the mental body. Because I think I spoke about that before I pressed record. So I'll just briefly go how I experienced it when I was able to access the mental body, and I would see one side of the duality, and I would recognize and become aware of the resistance that was attached to that one side of the duality. And when I released part of the resistance, or maybe all of that particular resistance, then I would see the other side of the duality. It doesn't have to be done this way. This is just the way I experienced it. And then I would see the attachments and the resistance I had to the other side of the duality. So, and then I would go back and forth. And it happened spontaneously. It wasn't something that I was, I was letting it happen and making it happen. I was using that principle of simultaneously making it happen and letting it happen, but it was happening naturally. And I would go pop back to the other side of the duality. I would find another level of a resistance, and then I would pop back to the other, and I would find, and then they would get closer and closer together, and I could actually feel it inside my head in the electromagnetics of the brain. And then eventually the duality would come together. It was very magnetic, and then I would feel it, and it would just come together like that. And then there would be a light explosion, and a literal light explosion in and around my head. And then that particular the resistance patterns or the attachments that I had to that particular duality was then completed. So, and and fully transmuted, and then of course you go on to the next. So I think and it's happened differently. Sometimes, I mean, that was how it happened mostly for me, especially in the beginning. But then eventually, I was accessing where I could see both sides of the duality pretty readily, and then there's an encompassment. You can encompass. It's kind of a little bit of the quicker route, but it takes a lot of awareness to be able to encompass both sides of the duality simultaneously, and both attachments and all the resistance to both sides of the duality simultaneously. But it can be done, and as you become more and more adept, that occurs, and then and then you can do it that way. So it's more of an encompassment of both sides, and you get to that eventually. Yeah.
Beautifully put. I remember when I was monitoring you at the VNC, and when you and when the meter dropped to zero, and to watch you experience and to kind of perceive somewhat what you were experiencing was significant in my journey. And again, that type of experience, it was quite a unique experience for you to have. Is something that I don't know that I have or haven't had. I really don't know. I've never been on the cans, I guess, when I was accessing dualities, but I've certainly transmuted a lot of different dualities on my journey. But like I said, it's been like the universe or whatever holding my points, and when the pain comes up or whatever is on the physical level, it can be something just as simple as a little sharp pain on one of my toes. It can be that simple, and it won't. It'll be just something that's there, and it's not going away. And I can hold my body perfectly still, and focus on that point, and work on intensifying it to where I feel it in my whole being, and then I guess somewhere in there I must do the poofing to where it just melts. It's like the song "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," where troubles melt like lemon drops. It's like the pain just like has no power against this love that resides in our heart, and it's our right and responsibility to reclaim our number one, our responsibility for having given our power to things outside of ourselves, making one thing more important than another. But earlier, one of the sayings that the principles I really like from the teachings of Saint Germain is, and I will use this, is it goes like this: "Let all my love flow back to thee, thou holy great God flame in me. Expand thy light and set me free. Let me thyself forever be." And it's such a simple thing, but whenever I say that, I feel like I'm acknowledging who I am, and acknowledging that that uh, that, that light, that from who knows how many embodiments I've been through, but it's always been the same light that I've animated different bodies with. And I believe we've all done this many times.
Right.
And that's why we call this earth a schoolroom. We're still learning how to be a human being rather than a human doing. And so much of us spend our times thinking that well, if I just accomplish this or that, but it's about, the I amness or the beingness of the, we'll find our sweet spot where we, and I'm still a work in progress. Believe me, I still have work to do, but those are some of the principles that I use when any type of challenge or conflict comes into my life. I find that if I just go back to these basic principles of body electronics, that there's a reason why this is drawn into my life, and not to resist it, and then just like you say, you put it. How do you say it? Being and doing this, or actively making it happen versus letting it happen. Yeah.
Not versus, but making it happen, letting it happen simultaneously.
Oh, there you go. That's what it was you said. Yeah. So
Yeah, that love within is the great transmuter. So the issues come with humanity. We're processing consciousness through into our reality, and the issue is that we're unconscious to a great extent to what's actually going on. So I don't know if we've lost Jeff. I'll give you
I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but there's no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we should end it there for today. We'll wrap up our discussion, and until next Tuesday. Thanks, Jeffrey, for coming back on and doing another discussion, and we'll have another one next Tuesday. Like I said last week, we'll do this for probably until spring. I think we have we wouldn't know it here in the Kootenay Mountains of British Columbia that spring is right around the corner, but because we have several feet of snow yet. And but yeah, spring is coming, so we'll recalibrate when spring happens, and we'll see where we want to go there. But we'll definitely be on for the next couple of Tuesdays, and then we'll decide what to do from there. Okay, thanks so much, Jeff, and thanks everybody for watching. And
I wanted to ask you a question, Ilya.
Sure.
Can I ask you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
I'm curious about what type of preparations or what type of heat you use to stay warm in that type of environment. Is it wood? Is it propane? Natural gas? How do you stay warm up there in all that snow?
I have 4 ways. I have a wood stove for when things go down usually around under 10 below 0 Celsius. I crank up the wood stove, and that really gives the inner pipes of the, especially, the pipes have to be kept nice and warm so nothing freezes. And so I do that if it goes below, even if it goes about 5 below, I start thinking about it. And then I have a really sweet propane fireplace that it looks, it burns fire, it looks like fire. It is fire, but it's propane. So I have a big propane tank because I'm totally, off the beaten track here. So there's no gas lines or anything out in the mountains here. I'm on the north side of a mountain. So I have propane. It's a fairly new, very efficient propane stove. It's awesome. It really, really keeps things nice and warm. And then I have electricity as backup, but I don't use that unless I absolutely have to. I've had it on maybe a couple of times this winter, but I tend to stay away from electric heat. But then my great investment this year, because I just moved, last year I moved into this home. It was my first winter in this mountain home. And I bought a infrared, it's called, and I got it from a place in Canada out of somewhere near Toronto called the Heat Healer. So if you look up Heat Healer, anything that I recommend, by the way, I don't get any kickbacks from, none of the enzyme, the enzyme companies or the minerals or nothing. I get no kickbacks for any of my recommendations. So the heat healer has, it's a heavy weighted infrared. They call it a blanket, but it's not a blanket. It's quite a, it's really long, and you get in it and you pull it over yourself, and then it has a thing that comes right up and around your neck, and you can have that thing go up to 80 degrees, and at 60 people start to sweat. But often if I'm watching a podcast, or I have it, I have a little room with a bed and a TV in it. I don't have a TV in my main area, but I have this area set up where I can watch my podcast while I'm in my infrared blanket. And that is awesome, because I can go outside, I can get really, really cold, and then I can come in and pop into the infrared blanket and get really, really hot. And that's been a really good therapy for me all winter. I've really, really enjoyed that.
That
Hey.
sounds delightful.
Oh, it's the best investment I've done in the last year for sure. Well, other than this property, where we have living water, by the way. It's living water that comes out of the mountain, gravity fed right down into the house, and it's amazing, just amazing water. I'm really grateful for that. One of the big reasons that I wanted this place. Yeah.
How do you heat your water?
We have a hot water heater.
And that's electric or propane?
It's electric. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool.
If the electricity goes out, then we have to heat things up on the wood stove.
That's the same reason I moved to the property I'm on, because they have a spring, and they also have an outdoor wood stove that I use to heat the house and the water with, so I can take a lot of baths also.
Great.
So similar consciousness. I like that.
Yeah. We have to. Water is so important, and yeah, we have to be as close to nature as we possibly can. That's for sure. That's my purpose here on this little mountain. Okay.
Mother Nature. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. And you have a great week.
Thanks, Jeff. You too. Okay. Till next Tuesday. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Toodles.